It's glazing day today, so I'll show you my little setup here. Give you a better view in a second, but glazing today, some prep is involved, and this is terracotta, so I took these out of the first firing, the bisque firing, and now there's a little bit of prep before I can actually glaze. So I'm going to show you all of that, and I'm going to show you the tools I use and more. Glazing is really my favorite part of the process. It takes a little bit more time because I brush the glaze on each piece. So it takes a little bit more time, but I actually feel like an artist when I do it. And brushing glaze onto the pieces allows me to concentrate glaze and layer glaze in the ways that I actually want it to, versus dipping, where you would take a piece and then dip kind of into a vat of glaze. You don't really have as much control over the concentration in certain areas of the piece. So that's why I like to paint the glaze on. Here is the scene. So first step in prepping our terracotta pieces is sanding. So I have, it looks a little used, but some of it's still good, sandpaper to kind of sand down the rough edges. And you can see, this is kind of funny. So I leave my pieces out to dry in the backyard, and you can see here, a little squirrel came up and gnawed on some of my pieces. So I think this is actually kind of, it was a mishap at first, but kind of cute because my pieces are nature inspired. And this is a little artistic nature mark from our resident squirrel. So I might try to buff this out, but I might also just try to embrace it and glaze over it. I've done that with a couple other pieces because our resident squirrels like to chew on our stuff. So I guess squirrels do that on rocks and that sort of thing to grind down their teeth. So I think these are teeth marks, but anyway, might embrace that, might buff them out. So buffing would be done with the sandpaper. And when I'm sanding and doing some other things with clay and clay materials, there is silica in the clay, and there's also silica in the glazes. And so when silica is dry and becomes airborne, that's not great for human lungs. So sometimes when I'm doing this sort of thing, if I'm not in open air like I am now, I will use a mask because I don't want to breathe the silica particles in when they're airborne. So there's multiple reasons why I use this sometimes in the different pieces of the process. Like I had, if you watch the video before this, there was a little explosion in the kiln, so I had to wear a mask while I was vacuuming out the kiln just because all that stuff was airborne, the silica was airborne. So got my mask. Once the pieces are nice and sanded down, I have my water and my sponge here, so I go ahead and take the sponge and just wipe off every piece, the bottom, the inside, the outside, just to get all of the particles off and prep it for glazing. Pieces are all prepped and ready to go, so we are getting into glazing now. So for glazing, I have all of my brushes over here, different sizes depending on what I am doing. Sometimes on pieces I'll layer glazes and I'll put like a small line in the middle and that sort of thing. So different sizes of brushes are great. I also have something called wax resist, so I could paint this on a piece, and if I paint over it with the glaze, it will not stick wherever I put wax resist on. So this comes in handy, especially on the bottoms of the pieces, because glaze cannot be on the bottom of any piece because it will stick to the kiln shelf, and we do not want that. So sometimes I'll put wax on the bottom or kind of near the bottom here as well if I don't want the glaze to go down to a certain point. And here are the glazes I'm going to be working with today. I labeled the lower fire glazes cone 06. A lot of my other glazes are cone 5. And apparently you can use higher fire glazes during lower firing. So that's actually something I'm going to test this time. So we'll see how that goes. But for the most part, I'm going to be using this winter green color, which is a lower fire, and then another lower fire Persian blue. Okay, so this is the first glaze round. I'm probably gonna do at least 2 more. This glaze tends to run apparently, so I didn't go down too far because I figure it's gonna kind of run down the piece and I don't want it to touch the kiln shelf. So this is round 1, kind of being conservative here, and we're gonna do 2 more rounds. This piece is now done. There's 3 layers on it. So I'm gonna do some pure pieces with just winter green. These pieces in the middle, I'm going to mix Persian blue and the winter green together to see how that looks. They're both blue colors. So the Persian blue is a little bit more intense and the winter green is kind of a more light style blue with a lot of dimension to it. So I always like to pair glazes, maybe a bolder color with then something with a little bit more dimension. So winter green seems to have that. We'll see once these come out of the kiln, but I'm thinking that's what's gonna happen. So on to mixing the 2, and then I'm gonna do these 2 pure Persian blue. These are close to being done, and once I'm finished, we will load them into the kiln. I'm guessing tomorrow morning, so stay tuned.